Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Life and Death Twilight Reimagined, Chapter 5, Blood Type. So, if you guys have seen the movie or read the first book, you know where we're at. I walked to English in a kind of daze. I didn't realize when I first came through the door that class had already started. Miss Mason's irritated voice was my first clue. "Thank you for joining us, Mr. Swan." Patches of red formed on my face as I hurried to my seat. It wasn't until class was over that I noticed Michaela wasn't sitting next to me like she usually did, and I remembered that I had hurt her feelings. But she and Erica waited at the door for me, so I hoped that meant I would be forgiven eventually. As we walked, Michaela seemed to become herself again, getting more enthusiastic as she talked about the weather report for the weekend. The rain was supposed to take a short break, so her beach trip would be possible. I tried to match her enthusiasm to make up for disappointing her yesterday, but I could tell I wasn't fooling either of them. Rain or no rain, we would be lucky if the temperature even got close to 50 degrees. Not my idea of a beach day. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. It was hard to believe I wasn't imagining things again, that Edith really had said those words, and that her eyes had looked the way when she was saying them. Something about her confused my reality. First I thought I'd seen her stop a van barehanded, and now this. The original delusion seemed more likely than the second, and that appealed to her on any level. Or that I don't know. But here I was, walking into this one with eyes wide open, and I didn't even care that the punchline was coming. At the moment it seemed like a decent trade, her laughter later for that look in her eyes now. I was both eager and nervous when I finally got to the cafeteria at lunchtime. Would she ignore me like usual? Would there be any sign from her that the conversation this morning had, in fact, happened? With a small percentage of my brain, I listened to Jeremy. Michaela had asked him to the dance, and they were going to go with a few others, Alan and Erica, Logan and Taylor. I think I grunted in the right places, because he didn't seem to notice how little of my attention I was giving him. My eyes went straight to her table as soon as I was through the door, and then disappointment hit like a punch to the gut. There were only 4 people there, and Edith wasn't one of them. Was she going to disappear every time something significant happened? Of course, the conversation this morning was only significant to me, I was sure. I lost my appetite. I grabbed a bottle of lemonade for something to carry, and followed Jeremy robotically through the line, wishing I were the kind of person who could just go home early. The kind who didn't worry about unexcused absences and detention and disappointed parental figures. "Edith Cullen is staring at you again," Jeremy said. I was 100% paying attention as soon as he said her name. "I wonder why she's sitting alone today." My head snapped up, and I quickly followed his line of sight. Edith was sitting at an empty table across the cafeteria from where she usually sat. Her dimples flashed as soon as she knew I'd seen her. She raised one hand and motioned with her index finger for me to join her. As I stared, not entirely believing my own eyes, she winked. "Does she mean you?" Jeremy asked. There was an insult in his astonishment, but I was past caring. Maybe she needs help with her biology homework," I muttered. "I guess I should go see what she wants." I could feel Jeremy staring after me as I walked away. I could also feel those ugly splotches of red start up my neck, and I tried to calm myself. Didn't work. When I got to her table, I just stood there behind the chair across from her, awkward. "Why don't you sit with me today?" she suggested through a wide smile. I sat down automatically, watching her expression. Was this how the joke ended? She hadn't stopped smiling. I found that I still didn't care. Whatever got me more time this close to her? She stared back at me, still smiling. Did she want me to say something? "This is, different," I finally managed. "Well," she said, and then paused. I could tell there was more, so I waited. The rest of it followed in a rush, the words blurring together so that it took me a minute to decipher the meaning. I decided as long as I was going to hell, I might as well do it thoroughly. I kept waiting, thinking she would explain, but she didn't. The silence got more uncomfortable as the seconds passed. "You know, I don't understand what you mean, right?" "I'm counting on it," she said, then her eyes focused behind me. "I think your friends are upset that I've stolen you." Suddenly I could feel all their eyes boring into my back. For once it didn't bother me at all. "They'll survive." She grinned. I may not give you back, though." I swallowed too loud, and she laughed. You look worried, she said. No. I stopped to swallow again, hearing the edge of a break in my voice. But surprised, yes. What's this all about? I gestured toward her and the rest of the empty table. I told you, I'm tired of trying to stay away from you, so I'm giving up. The smile was fading, and her eyes were serious by the end. Giving up? I repeated. Yes, giving up trying to be good. I'm just going to do what I want now, and let the chips fall where they may. That's a phrase I've heard many times. I still don't like it. The smile disappeared completely, and a hard edge crept into her silky voice. You lost me again. It looked like she found that funny. I always say too much when I'm talking to you. That's one of the problems. Don't worry, I don't understand anything you say. Like I said, I'm counting on it. We stared at each other for a few seconds, but the quiet wasn't awkward this time. It was more charged. My face started to get hot again. So, I said, looking away so that I could catch my breath, in plain English, are we friends now? Friends, she murmured. She sounded like it wasn't her favorite word. Or not, I offered. Well, we can try, I suppose, but I'm warning you again that I'm not a good friend for you to have. Her smile was brittle now, the warning real. You say that a lot. Funny how my stomach was rolling. Was it because I was hungry after all? Because she was smiling at me? Or because I suddenly almost believed her? I could tell that she believed what she was saying. I do, because you're not listening. I'm still waiting for you to hear me. If you're smart, you'll avoid me. Then I had to smile, and I watched as her smile automatically got bigger in response. I thought we'd already come to the conclusion that I'm an idiot, or absurd, or whatever. I did apologize, for the second one at least. Will you forgive me for the first? I spoke without thinking. Yeah, of course. You don't have to apologize to me. She sighed. Don't I? I didn't know how to answer. It sounded like a rhetorical question anyway. I stared down at my hands wrapped around the lemonade bottle, not sure what to do. It was so strange to sit with her here, like normal people. I was sure only one of us was normal. What are you thinking? She asked. I looked up. She was staring again, her gold eyes curious, and like the first time I'd seen her, frustrated. Once again, my thoughts refused to pass through the appropriate filter. I'm wondering what you are. Her smile tightened, like her teeth were suddenly clamped together, but she held it carefully in place. Are you having much luck with that? Her voice was casual, like she didn't really care about my answer. My neck got hot, and I assumed unattractively blotchy. During the last month I'd given it some thought, but the only solutions I could come up with were completely ridiculous, like Clark Kent and Peter Parker level nonsense. She tilted her head to the side, staring into my eyes as if she was trying to see through them, right into my brain. She smiled, inviting this time, impossible to resist. Won't you tell me? But I had to try to resist. She already thought I was an idiot. I shook my head. Too embarrassing. That's really frustrating, she complained. Really? I raised my eyebrows. Like someone refusing to tell you what she's thinking, even if all the while she's making cryptic little comments designed to keep you up at night wondering what she could possibly mean? Frustrating like that? She frowned, her lips pouting out in a distracting way. I worked to hold on to my focus. Or is it frustrating like, say, she's done a bunch of other strange things, for example, saving your life under impossible circumstances one day, then treating you like a pariah the next? And she never explained any of that, either. Even after she promised. Frustrating like that? Her frown twitched, and then she settled into a deeper scowl. You're really not over that yet? Not quite yet. Would another apology help? An explanation would be better. She pursed her lips, then glanced past my left arm and laughed once. What? Your girlfriend thinks I'm being mean to you. She's debating whether or not to come break up our fight. I don't have a girlfriend, and you're trying to change the subject. She ignored the second half of my statement. You might not think of her that way, but it's how she thinks of you. There's no way that's true. It is, I told you. Most people are very easy to read. Except me. Yes, except for you. Her eyes shifted to me and intensified, drilling into mine. I wonder why that is. I had to look away. I concentrated on unscrewing the lid of my lemonade. I took a swig, staring at the table without seeing it. Aren't you hungry? She asked. Her stare was less penetrating now, I saw with relief. No, I didn't think it was necessary to mention that my stomach wasn't steady enough for food. You? I looked at the empty table in front of her. No, I'm not hungry. She smiled like I was missing some inside joke. Can you do me a favor? I asked, the words escaping before I could make sure they were allowed. She got serious quickly. That depends on what you want. It's not much, I promise. I promised, rather. She waited, still guarded, but clearly curious. Could you warn me beforehand, the next time you decide to ignore me for my own good or whatever? Just so I'm prepared. I looked at the lemonade again, and as I asked, tracing the lip of the opening with one finger, that sounds fair. She looked like she was trying not to laugh when I glanced up. Thanks. Can I have a favor in return, she asked. Sure. It was my turn to be curious. What would she want from me? Tell me one of your theories. Whoops. No way. You promised me a favor. And you've broken promises before, I reminded her. Just one theory. I won't laugh. Yes, you will. I had no doubt about that. She looked down, then glanced up at me through her thick lashes, her long gold eyes scorching underneath. Please, she breathed, leaning toward me. Without permission, my body leaned closer to her, like she was a magnet and I was a paperclip, till her face was less than a foot from mine. My mind went totally blank. Totally. That was the wrong accent. I shook my head, trying to clear it, and forced myself to sit back. What? One little theory, she purred. Please? Well, bitten by a radioactive spider? Was she a hypnotist too? Or was I just a hopeless pushover? She rolled her eyes. That's not very creative. Sorry, that's all I've got. You're not even close. No spiders. No spiders? No radioactivity? None at all. Huh, I mumbled. She chuckled. Kryptonite doesn't bother me either. You're not supposed to laugh, remember? She pressed her lips together, but her shoulders shook from holding the laughter back. I'll figure it out eventually, I muttered. Her humor vanished like a switch flipped off. I wish you wouldn't try. How can I not wonder? I mean, you're impossible. I didn't say it like criticism, just a statement. You are not possible. You are more than what it is possible. She understood. But what if I'm not a superhero? What if I'm the villain? She smiled as she said this, playfully, but her eyes were heavy with some burden I couldn't imagine. Oh, I said, surprised. Her many hints started adding up until they finally made sense. Oh, okay. She waited, suddenly rigid with stress. In that second, all of her walls seemed to disappear. What exactly does okay mean? She asked so quietly it was almost a whisper. I tried to order my thoughts, but her anxiety pushed me to answer faster. I said the words without preparing them first. You're dangerous. It came out like a question, and there was doubt in my voice. She was smaller than I was, no more than my age, and delicately built. Under normal circumstances, I would have laughed at applying the word dangerous to someone like her. But she was not normal, and there was no one like her. I remembered for the first time she glared at me with hate in her eyes, and I felt genuinely afraid, though I hadn't understood that reaction in the moment, and I thought it foolish just seconds later. Now I understood. Under the doubt, outside the incongruity of the word dangerous applied to her slim, perfect body. I feel uncomfortable. I lost my place, no. Oh, here it is. I could feel the truth of the foundation. The danger was real, though my logical mind couldn't make sense of it, and she'd been trying to warn me all along. Dangerous, I muttered again, trying to fit the word to the person in front of me. Her porcelain face was still vulnerable, without walls or secrets. Her eyes were wide now, anticipating my reaction. She seemed to be bracing herself for some kind of impact. But not the villain, I whispered. No, I don't believe that. You're wrong. Her voice was almost inaudible. She looked down, reaching out to steal the lid for my lemonade. Then she spun it like a top between her fingers. I took advantage of her inattention to stare some more. She meant what she was saying, that was obvious. She wanted me to be afraid of her. But what I felt what is with me? Was fascinated. There were some nerves, of course, being so close to her, fear of making a fool of myself, but all I wanted was to sit here forever, to listen to her voice and watch the expressions fly across her face so much faster than I could analyze them. So, of course, that was when I noticed that the cafeteria was almost empty. I shoved my chair away from the table, and she looked up. She seemed sad. But I resigned. Like this was the reaction she'd been waiting for. We're going to be late. I don't know where that came from. I told her, scrambling to my feet. She was surprised for just a second, and then the now familiar amusement was back. I'm not going to class today. Her fingers twirled the lid so fast that it was just a blur. Why not? She smiled up at me, but her eyes were not entirely disguised. I could still see the stress behind her facade. It's healthy to ditch class now and then, she said. Oh, well, I guess I should go. Was there another option? I wasn't much for ditching, but if she asked me to... She turned her attention back to the makeshift top. I'll see you later, then. That sounded like a dismissal, and I wasn't totally against being dismissed. There was so much to think about, and I didn't do my best thinking with her near. The first bell rang, and I hurried to the door. I glanced back once to see that she hadn't moved at all, and the lid was still spinning in a tight circle like it would never stop. As I half ran to class, my head was spinning just as fast. So few questions had been answered. None, really, when I thought through it. But so many more had been raised. I was lucky. The teacher was in the room when I ran in late, face hot. Both Alan and Michaela were staring at me. Alan with surprise, almost awe, and Michaela with resentment. Mrs. Banner made her entrance then, calling the class to order while juggling a bunch of cardboard boxes in her hands. She let the boxes fall onto Michaela's table and asked her to start passing them around the class. Okay, guys, I want you all to take one piece from each box, she said as she produced a pair of rubber gloves from the pocket of her lab coat and pulled them on. The crack as the glove snapped into place was strangely ominous. The first should be an indicator card, she went on, grabbing a white card about the size of an index card and displaying it to us. It had 4 squares marked on it instead of lines. The second is a 4-pronged applicator. She held up something that looked like a nearly toothless hair pick. And the third is a sterile micro lancet. She displayed a small piece of blue plastic before splitting it open. The barb was invisible from the distance, but my stomach plunged. I'll be coming around with a dropper of water to prepare your cards, so please don't start until I get to you. She began at Michaela's table again, carefully putting 1 drop of water in each of the 4 squares of Michaela's card. Then I want you to carefully prick your finger with the lancet. She grabbed Michaela's hand, jabbed the spike into the tip of Michaela's middle finger. Ouch! Michaela complained. What? Clammy moisture broke out across my forehead, and my ears began a faint ringing. Put a small drop of blood on each of the prongs, Miss Banner demonstrated as she instructed, squeezing Michaela's finger till the blood flowed. I swallowed convulsively, and my stomach heaved. And then apply it to the card. She finished, holding up the dripping red card for us to see. I closed my eyes, trying to hear through the humming in my ears. The Red Cross is having a blood drive in Port Angeles next weekend, so I thought you should all know your blood type. She sounded proud of herself. Those of you who aren't 18 yet will need a parent's permission. I have slips at my desk. She continued through the room with her water dropper. I put my cheek against the cool black tabletop and tried to hold on to it, as everything seemed to get farther away, slithering down a dark tunnel. The squeals and complaints and giggles as my classmates skewered their fingers all sounded far off in the distance. I breathed slowly in and out through my mouth. Beau, are you all right? Mrs. Banner asked. Her voice was close to my head, but still far away, and it sounded alarmed. I already know my blood type, Mrs. Banner. I'm O negative. Oh dear. I couldn't open my eyes. Are you feeling faint? Yes, ma'am, I muttered, wishing I could kick myself for not ditching when I had the chance. Hang on one sec. Sorry, congestion. Can someone walk Beau to the nurse, please? She called. I will. Even though I was far away, I recognized Michaela's voice. Can you walk? Mrs. Banner asked me. Yes, I whispered. Just let me get out of here, I thought. I'll crawl. I felt Michaela grab my hand, and I was sure it was all sweaty and gross, but I couldn't care about that yet, and I worked to get my eyes open while she tugged me up. I just had to get out of this room before it went full dark. I stumbled toward the door while Michaela put her arm around my waist, trying to steady me. I put my arm over her shoulders, but she was too short to help me my balance much. I tried to carry my own weight as much as possible. Michaela and I lumbered slowly across the campus. When we were around the edge of the cafeteria out of sight of Building 4, in case Mrs. Banner was watching, I stopped fighting. Just let me sit for a minute, please, I asked. Michaela breathed out a sigh of relief as I settled clumsily on the edge of the walk. And whatever you do, keep your hand in your pocket, I said. Everything seemed to be swirling dizzily, even when I closed my eyes. I slumped over to one side, putting my cheek against the freezing, damp cement of the sidewalk. That helped. Wow, you're green, Beau, Michaela said nervously. Just give me a minute. Beau? A different voice called from the distance. Oh, please, no. Not this, too. Let me just be imagining that horribly familiar voice. What's wrong? Is he hurt? The voice was closer now, and it sounded strangely fierce. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping to die, or at the very least not throw up. Michaela sounded stressed. I think he fainted. I don't know what happened. He didn't even stick his finger. Beau, can you hear me? Edith's voice was right by my head now, and she sounded relieved. No, I groaned. She laughed. I was trying to help him to the nurse, Michaela explained, defensive, but he wouldn't go any farther. I'll take him, Edith said. The smile was still in her voice. You can go back to class. What? No, I'm supposed to... And then a thin, strong arm was under both of mine, and I was on my feet without realizing how I got there. The strong arm of the law, cold like the sidewalk, held me tight against a slim body that was almost like a crutch. My eyes flipped open in surprise, but all I could see was her tangled bronze hair against my chest. I started moving forward, and my feet fumbled trying to catch up. I expected to fall, but she somehow kept me upright. I didn't so much as stagger when my full weight tugged us both forward. Then again, I didn't weigh as much as a van. I'm good, I swear, I mumbled. Please let me not vomit on her. Hey, Michaela called after us, already 10 paces behind. Edith ignored her. You look simply awful, she told me. I could hear the grin. Just put me back on the sidewalk, I groaned. I'll be fine in a few minutes. She propelled us quickly forward while I tried to make my feet move in the right pattern to match her speed. A few times I could swear that my feet were actually dragging across the ground, but then I couldn't feel them very well, so I wasn't sure. So you faint at the sight of blood, she asked. Apparently this was hilarious. That would be, wouldn't it? I didn't answer. I closed my eyes again, and fought the nausea, limbs clamped together. The most important thing was that I not vomit on her. I could survive everything else. And not even your own blood, she laughed. It was like the sound of a bell ringing. I have a weak vasovagal... Vagal? Vagal? I don't know. I muttered. It's just a neurally mediated syncope. I am not a trained medical professional. She laughed again. Apparently the big words I'd memorized to explain these situations did not oppress her the way they were supposed to. I wasn't sure how she got the door open while dragging me, but suddenly it was warm, everywhere except her body, where her body was pressed against me. I wish I felt normal so that I could appreciate that more, her body touching mine. That's so creepy. I knew that under normal circumstances I would be enjoying this. It's really creepy. Oh my. No, wait. Oh my. No. George Takei sounds like... Oh well. I'll come back to this. A male voice gasped. He's having a neurally mediated syncope, Edith explained brightly. I opened my eyes. I was in the office, and Edith was dragging me past the front counter toward the door at the back of the room. Mr. Cope, the balding receptionist, ran ahead of her to hold it open. He faltered when he heard the dire-sounding diagnosis. Should I call 911? He gasped. It's just a fainting spell, I mumbled. A grandfatherly old man, the school medic, looked up from a novel, shocked, as Edith hauled me into the room. Did he notice that when she leaned me against the cot, she half lifted me into place? The crackly paper complained as she pushed me down with one hand against my chest, then turned and swung my feet up onto the vinyl mattress. This reminded me of the time she'd swung my feet out of the way of the van, and the memory made me dizzy. They're blood typing in biology, Edith explained to the nurse. I watched the old man nod sagely. There's always one. Edith covered her mouth and pretended her laugh was a cough. She'd gone to stand across the room from me. Her eyes were bright, excited. Just lie down for a minute, son, the old nurse told me. It'll pass. I know, I muttered. In fact, the dizziness was already beginning to fade. Soon the tunnel would shorten and things would sound normal again. Does this happen a lot? He asked. I sighed. I have a weak vasovagal system. Vagal? I don't know. The nurse looked confused. Sometimes, I told him. Edith laughed again, not bothering to disguise it. "You can go back to class now," the nurse said to her. "I'm supposed to stay with him," Edith answered. She said it with such confidence that even though he pursed his lips, the nurse didn't argue it further. "I'll get you some ice for your head," he said to me, and then shuffled out of the room. I let my eyelids fall shut again. "You were right. I usually am, but about what in particular this time?" "Ditching is healthy." I worked to breathe in and out evenly. "You scared me for a minute there," she admitted, after a pause. The way she said it made it sound, there we go, like she was confessing a weakness, something to be ashamed of. "I thought that Newton girl had poisoned you." That actually does sound kind of funny. Hilarious. I still had my eyes shut, but I was feeling more normal every minute. "Honestly," she said, "I've seen corpses with better color, and I was concerned that I might have to avenge your death." "I bet Michaela's annoyed. She absolutely loathes me," Edith said cheerfully. "You don't know that," I countered, but then I wondered. "You should have seen her face. It was obvious." "How did you even see us? I thought you were ditching." I was pretty much fine now, though the queasiness would probably have passed faster if I'd eaten something for lunch. On the other hand, maybe it was lucky my stomach was empty. I was in my car listening to a CD. Such a normal response, it surprised me. I heard the door and opened my eyes to see the nurse with a cold compress in his hand. Here you go, son." He laid it across my forehead. "You're looking better," he added. "I think I'm okay," I said, sitting up. Just a little ringing in my ears, no spinning. The mint green walls stayed where they should. I could tell he was about to make me lie back down, but the door opened just then, and Mr. Cope stuck his head in. "We've got another one," he warned. I lurched off the cot to make room for the next victim, and handed the compress back to the nurse. "Here, I don't need this." And then Michaela staggered through the door, now supporting Leanne Stevens, another girl in our biology class. She was currently sallow green, and Edith and I drew back against the wall to give them room. "Oh no," Edith murmured. "Go out to the office, Beau." I looked down at her, confused. "Trust me, go." I spun and caught the door before it closed, floundering out of the infirmary. I could feel Edith right behind me. "You actually listened to me," she said, surprised. I smelled the blood. Leanne wasn't sick from watching other people. Much less embarrassing, I thought. "People can't smell blood," Edith contradicted. "I can. That's what makes me sick. It smells like rust and salt." She was staring at me with a wary expression. "What?" "It's nothing." Michaela came through the door then, glancing from Edith to me and back again. "Thanks so much for your help, Edith," she said, her sickly sweet tone a pretty good indication that Edith was right about the loathing thing. "I don't know what Beau here would have done without you." "Don't mention it," Edith replied with an amused smile. "You look better," Michaela said to me in the same tone. "I'm so glad." "Just keep your hand in your pocket," I cautioned her again. "It's not bleeding anymore," she told me, her voice going back to normal. "Are you coming to class?" "No, thanks. I just have to turn around and come back." "Yeah, I guess. So are you going this weekend? To the beach?" While she spoke, she flashed a dark look toward Edith, who was standing against the cluttered counter motionless as a sculpture staring off into space. I didn't want to upset her more. "Sure, I said I was in." "We're meeting at my parents' store at 10. Her eyes flickered to Edith again, and I could tell she was worried she was giving out too much information. Her body language made it clear this wasn't an open invitation. "I'll be there, I promised." "I'll see you in the gym then," she said, moving uncertainly toward the door. "Yeah, see you," I replied. She looked at me again, her round face slightly pouting, and then as she walked through the door, her shoulders slumped. Guilt lanced through me, the same as yesterday. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but it seemed like it just kept happening. I thought about looking at her disappointed face all through gym. "Ugh, Jim," I muttered. "I can take care of that." I hadn't heard Edith walk over, but now she spoke from right beside me, making me jump. "Go sit down and look pale," she instructed in a whisper. That wasn't a challenge. I was usually pale, and the recent episode had left a light sheen of sweat on my face. I sat in one of the creaky folding chairs, rested my head against the wall with my eyes closed. Fainting was exhausting. Is it? I wouldn't know. I heard Edith speaking softly at the counter. "Mr. Cope?" I hadn't heard the man return to his desk, but he answered, "Yes." "Beau has gym next hour, and I don't think he feels well enough. Actually, I was thinking I should drive him home. Do you mind excusing him from class?" Her voice was like melting honey. Unfortunately, mine is not. I apologize. I could guess how much more overwhelming her eyes would be. "Do you need to be excused too, Edith?" Mr. Cope's voice broke. "Why couldn't I do that to people?" "No, I have Mr. Joff," Edith said. "He won't mind." Okay, it's all taken care of. You feel better, Beau, Mr. Cope called to me, and I nodded weakly, hamming it up just a bit. Can you walk, or do you want me to help you again? With her back to the receptionist, her expression turned sarcastic. I'll walk. I stood carefully and I was still fine. She opened the door for me, her smile polite but her eyes mocking. I felt stupid as I walked through the door out into the cold, fine mist that had just begun to fall. But it felt good, the first time I'd enjoyed the never-ending moisture falling out of the sky, as it washed the sweat off my face. Thanks for that, I said, when she followed me out. It's almost worth getting sick to miss Jim. Uh-oh. Anytime, she promised. She just stared past me into the rain. So, are you going, this Saturday, to the beach trip? I was hoping she would, though it seemed unlikely. I couldn't picture her loading up into a carpool with the rest of the kids from school. She didn't belong in the same world. But just wishing that she might give me the first thrill of enthusiasm I'd felt for the outing. Where all are you going? Close enough. She was still staring ahead, expressionless, but her question made me hope she was considering it. Down to La Push, to First Beach. I watched her face, trying to read it. I thought I saw her eyes narrow just slightly. She finally looked up at me and smiled. I really don't think I was invited. I just invited you. Let's you and I not antagonize poor Michaela anymore this week. We don't want her to snap. Her eyes danced like she was enjoying the idea more than she should. Excuse me. Fine, whatever. I grumbled, preoccupied by the way she said you and I. I liked it more than I should. We were at the parking lot now, so I angled toward my truck. Something caught my jacket and yanked me back half a step. Where are you going? She asked, surprised. Her little hand had a fistful of my jacket. She didn't look like she'd even planted her feet. For a second, I couldn't answer. She denied being a superhero, but my mind couldn't seem to frame it any other way. What? It was like Supergirl had left her cape at home. Mika has a thing for Supergirl. I wondered if it was supposed to bother me that she was so much stronger than I was, but I hadn't been insecure about things like that for a long time. Ever since I'd outgrown many bullies, I'd been fairly well satisfied. Sure, I'd like to be coordinated, but it didn't bother me that I wasn't good at sports. I didn't have time for them anyway, and they'd always seemed a little childish. Why get so worked up about a bunch of people chasing a ball around? I was strong enough that I could make people leave me alone, and that was all I wanted. So this small girl was stronger than I was, a lot. But I was willing to bet she was stronger than everyone else I knew, kids and adults alike. She could take Schwarzenegger in his prime. Is that how you pronounce it? Schwarzenegger, perhaps? I couldn't compete with that, and I didn't need to. She was special. Beau, she asked, and I realized I hadn't answered her question. What? I asked where you were going. Home, or am I not? Her expression confused me. Didn't you hear me promise to take you safely home? Do you think I'm going to let you drive in your condition? What condition? I'd hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you have a weak vasovagal system. Vasovagal system? I don't know. I give up. I think I'll survive, I said. I tried to take another step toward my truck, but her hand didn't free my jacket. I stopped and looked down at her again. Okay, why don't you tell me what you want me to do? Her smile got wider. Very sensible. You're going to get into my car, and I'm going to drive you home. I have two issues with that. One, it's not necessary, and two, what about my truck? One, it is, necessary is a subjective word, and two, I'll have Archie, never mind, drop it off after school. I was distracted by the casual reminder that she said that she had siblings, strange, pale, beautiful siblings. Special siblings? Special like her? Are you going to put up a fuss, she asked, when I didn't speak. Is there any point in resisting? They are the Borg. I tried to decipher all the layers to her smile, but I didn't get very far. It warms my cold heart to see you learning so quickly. This way. She dropped her fistful of jacket. I feel like that's a movie reference. And turned. I followed her willingly. The smooth roll of her hips was just as hypnotic, really, as her eyes, and there wasn't a downside to getting more time with her. The inside of the Volvo was just as pristine as the outside. Instead of the smell of gasoline and tobacco, there was just a faint perfume. It was almost familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Whatever it was, it smelled amazing. As the engine purred quietly to life, she played with a few dials, turning the heat on and the music down. Is that Claire de Lune? My mom loves that, by the way, I asked. She glanced at me, surprised. You're a fan of Debussy? Debussy? I don't know. Gary Busey. I shrugged. My mom plays a lot of classical stuff around the house. I only know my favorites. It's one of my favorites, too. Well, imagine that, I said. We have something in common. I expected her to laugh, but she only stared out through the rain. I relaxed against the light gray seat, responding automatically to the familiar melody because I was mostly watching her from the corner of my eye. The rain blurred everything outside the window into gray and green smudges. It took me a minute to realize we were driving very fast. The car moved so smoothly I didn't feel the speed. Only the town flashing by gave it away. What's your mother like? She asked suddenly. Her butterscotch eyes studied me curiously while I answered. She kind of looks like me, same eyes, same hair color, but she's short. She's an extrovert and pretty brave. She is also slightly eccentric, a little irresponsible, and a very unpredictable cook. She was my best friend. That sounds like my mom. I stopped. It made me depressed to talk about her in the past tense. I miss my mom. How old are you, Beau? Her voice sounded frustrated for some reason I couldn't imagine. The car stopped, and I realized that we were at Charlie's house already. The rain had really picked up, so heavy now that I could barely see the house. It was like the car was submerged in a vertical river. I wonder what that would look like. I'm 17, I said, a little confused by her tone. You don't seem 17, she said. It was like an accusation. I laughed. What? She demanded. My mom always says I was born 35 years old and that I get more middle-aged every year. You guys know Manny from Modern Family? Apparently that was me growing up from being a toddler up until, my mom and I started turning kind of nuts. I laughed again and then sighed. Well, someone has to be the adult. I had paused for a second. You don't seem much like a junior in high school either. She made a face and changed the subject. Why did your mother marry Phil? I was surprised that she remembered Phil's name. I was sure I'd only said it once, almost 2 months ago. It took me a second to answer. My mom... She's very young for her age. I think Phil makes her feel even younger. Anyway, she's crazy about him. Those types of relationships never last. Personally, I didn't see it, but did anyone ever think anyone was good enough for his mom? No. Do you approve, she asked. I shrugged. I want her to be happy, and he's who she wants. That's very generous. I wonder, does anyone really know what they want, though? What? Would she extend the same courtesy to you, do you think? No matter who your choice was. Her eyes were suddenly intent, searching mine. I think so. But she's the adult on paper, at least. That's a little different. Her face relaxed. No one too scary, then, she teased. I grinned back. What do you mean by scary? Tattoos and facial piercings? Those are some of the nicest people. Or they can be. That's one definition, I suppose. What's your definition? She ignored me and asked another question. Do you think I could be scary? She raised one eyebrow. I pretended to examine her face for a minute, just as an excuse to stare at her. My favorite thing to do. It's such a creepy thing! Her features were so delicate, so symmetrical. Her face would stop anyone in his tracks, but it wouldn't make him run in the other direction. The opposite, in fact. Wait, no, in fact wasn't in there. It's kind of hard to imagine that, I admitted. She frowned to herself. But, I mean, I'm sure you would be if you wanted to. She tilted her head and gave me an exasperated smile, but didn't say anything else. So you're going to tell me about your family? I asked. It's got to be much more interesting, got to be a much more interesting story than mine. She was instantly cautious. What do you want to know? The Cullens adopted you? Yes. I hesitated for a minute. What happened to your parents? They died many years ago. Her tone was matter of fact. I'm sorry. Should be. I don't really remember them clearly. Corinne and Ernest have been my parents for a long time now. And you love them? It wasn't a question. It was obvious in the way she said their names. Yes, she smiled. I can't imagine two better people. Then you're very lucky. I know it. And your brother and sister? She glanced at the clock on the dashboard. My brother and sister, Jessamine and Royal, for that matter, are going to be quite upset if they have to stand in the rain waiting for me. Oh, sorry. I guess you have to go. It was stupid, but I didn't want to get out of the car. And you probably want your truck back before Chief Swan gets home and you have to explain about the syncopal episode? Syncopal? I don't know. She was good with medical jargon, but then her mother was a doctor. Mine's a teacher. No, she's a counselor now. I forget. I'm sure he's already heard. There are no secrets in Forks, I grumbled. Apparently, I'd said something funny, but I couldn't guess what it was, or why there was an edge to her laughter. Have fun at the beach, she said when she was finished. Good weather for sunbathing, she gestured to the sheeting rain. Won't I see you tomorrow? No, Eleanor, starting the weekend early. What are you going to do? A friend could ask that, right? I hope she wouldn't hear the disappointment in my voice. We'll be hiking the Goat Rocks Wilderness just south of Rainier. I feel like that should be pronounced with a French accent. Oh, sounds fun. She smiled. Will you do something for me this weekend? She turned to look me straight in the eyes, her own burning in their hypnotic way. I nodded, helpless. Anything I could have said, and it wouldn't have been true. Kind of awkward. Don't be offended, but you seem to be one of those people who just attracts accidents like a magnet. Try not to fall in the ocean or get run over by anything, all right? She flashed her dimples at me, which took away some of the sting of being called incompetent. I'll see what I can do, I promised. I also say that. I jumped into the vertical river and ran for the porch. By the time I turned around, the Volvo had disappeared. Oh! I clutched at my jacket pocket, remembering I'd forgotten to give her my key. The pocket was empty. Okay, that was chapter 5, Blood Type. What'd you guys think? I realized it was a long video, but hey. I also stumbled on quite a few words in this chapter, even though I really shouldn't have. I apologize for that. Hopefully by the end of the series I'll be getting better at it. So I'm noticing a huge difference in, I guess, characterization between Beau and Bella, which I will go more in-depth in a later video, since this one's already over 42 minutes long. So let me know if you guys are having fun with the series, or if I should look into doing something else. I'm about to go get Iggy out of the bath. This time I fed him before I took him in there, so hopefully he will be more, whatchamacallit, agreeable. Okay, that's enough rambling for today. Thanks you guys for watching. Any tips or suggestions or criticisms of any kind, I welcome them with open arms. Also, check out this t-shirt. You are loved. Never forget that. But until next time, goodbye everybody.